focus in, is the composition of the wastewater from a vertical well different than the composition of the wastewater from a horizontally drilled well?
There's no difference.
Go ahead.
Can you talk to us a little bit about the wastewater and the ability to treat that wastewater? And I think that if we have more wastewater coming from these wells, we'll see an increased need for the injection wells, which I think is the focus of today's hearing and what gives us a lot of concern. What are the options out there for eventually being able to treat this water? Are we close to that? If the wastewater is 98% water and just 2% chemical, it seems like perhaps we should be exploring that option. And could you let us know where we are scientifically in getting there?
Well, I think the most significant thing that I see happening in our industry is how companies are trying to change the fluid we use to frac with itself. We're talking about green fluids where the chemicals that we put into the frac fluid to begin with are not harmful chemicals, and even though they're diluted to the point where, as you heard earlier, 99% of what we put in the ground is water and sand, we still do put some chemicals in that are very important. They do certain things to the rock. That they inhibit clay from swelling, or they keep iron from dropping out in the frac fluid, they allow us to carry the sand better out into the rock formation and keep the rock propped open. Companies, and you can go to a number of websites. I know Chesapeake Energy has a website set up, and they have a site there where they talk about the green fracturing fluids that they're experimenting with, and they're trying to minimize anything that goes into the water that would be, a real contaminant. When we frack the well and we put it back on production, you bring along with that water salt water from the formation, because all of these rock formations were basically laid down in a marine environment, an ocean environment. So the water in the rocks is salty to begin with. So the water that we get back from the wells, actually the frack water is going to have salt water mixed with it. It's also probably going to have some oil mixed with it. Now we bring it back to the surface, we put it in tanks. The oil is something we want to collect, and as soon as we're able to, we start running that fluid through a separator so that the water is separated from the oil and the gas is separated from the water and the oil itself, and you get 3 streams coming out. Then you can deal with the brine or the salt water and frac fluid. There are some processes that people are using to try to clean that water up, and a couple companies are experimenting with reusing the water on more than one fracturing treatment. And I think that's a real plus. But again, it's going to be a function of how salty the water is that comes back in the process.
Representative Patter.
And Dr. Chase, thank you for your testimony. You talked a little bit about the companies that are looking to open up the injection wells. I think that we're focused on here. You sounded like you made a recommendation. Maybe they should check depths beforehand, or could you speak a little bit more about what you were recommending?
Okay.
That was a recommendation.
Are you referring to that microseismic monitoring because that's really what I was saying up in this area. If you really wanted to gather some scientific data, I would probably seek to employ that process and use one well for injection and then monitor the other wells and see if the actual injection of the water going into the rock down there causes microseismic events. In this case, you wouldn't be looking for a fracture to be growing. You would be looking for something to be happening along a fault. Now, there is a fault up in this area from what I understand of the geology, and a fault is different than a fracture. A fault is where you have 2 planes of rock, whether it's in the horizontal direction or the vertical direction, but there's pent-up stress in those rocks. And when the stress releases, that's when you get an earthquake, because the rock actually moves either upward and downward or sideways. can be a slip fault, like the St. Andreas fault. It seems to be slipping past each other. I don't know what kind of a fault we have up here. Maybe the geologist can talk a little bit more about that. But one thing you could do is use the microseismic monitoring to see what happens when you inject.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I heard that recommendation. I was thinking about when you were talking in regards to companies opening up a new injection well or purchasing property for a deep injection well. Do you recall that?
Okay. With new injection wells, I think it would be a question of knowing, using all the information that's available. If there's seismic data available, have that data looked at either by the state or by the company. But I wasn't saying that a company should go out and shoot that seismic data, because I don't, honestly, it's very expensive to shoot seismic data. And if it's available, it would be much better to utilize it if it's there. Having a company shoot a seismic survey just to locate an injection well might make the cost of that injection well and the profitability of the injection well nil. You might not be able to justify that. So, but I do think you should use what's available.
Chairman, so in understanding the permit process, would you recommend that the state put that in as part of the regulatory process? Someone is looking at opening up or purchasing a new deep injection well. I would assume that that's already done. You're saying it's not done now?
The seismic process? I'm not saying the state should require that. I think I would rather let the state come to some decisions on that. They're working with the Geological Survey and the EPA.
Thank you.
I'm not sure it can be, I don't know the affordability of it.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, Dr. Chase, I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank the students for allowing me to have you up here.
They really appreciated having their first day of classes off today.
Thank you, Doctor. Next witness will be Dr. Jeffrey.